I want to talk in this first session. I'd like us to consider what happens when things change. Now, I deliberately started with that little video because the subject there clearly is change. What do you do when somebody moves the cheese? What will make you run out into the maze and look for more cheese? Or what will make you stand there saying, who moved my cheese? Who moved my cheese? It's not fair. I want my own cheese back. I don't think I would like the taste of new cheese, quote unquote, you know? We need to be sure that as we go forward, that we've got a plan. And I want to just put this into slide mode, and I want to share this screen with you, and you ought to be able to see it now. Am I right? Yeah? You got it?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Just please keep on confirming that, because you know that I do get it wrong sometimes. Let's have a look at this. I've spoken about a problem that we've got in sub-Saharan Africa.
Dad, can you make me some coffee?
Turn your microphone off when you ask your dad to make you coffee, because we all want coffee when you do that. Okay. Okay. So, no, you know, I still haven't got this thing right where I'm supposed to be able to see you, but I don't care. I'm just going to talk to you as if I can see you, and I trust that you are nodding and that you're agreeing with me at the moment. I'll come back to a place where I can see you soon. In sub-Saharan Africa, we have a problem. And the problem is that we've developed a culture of victimhood. I wish it were not so. I would not, you know, I think it's a horrible thing to say about a region. But the reality is that the rest of the world has climbed out of poverty in a way that is near miraculous. Sub-Saharan Africa has become poorer while the rest of the world has been getting richer. But the conundrum is, and the perplexing truth is, that many of the world's biggest supplies of natural resources are in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, can you imagine what the world would look like if we as a region could get our act together? You go to the DRC, where Trish and her husband have lived and worked, and you know, there's such an abundance of natural resources. But what do you experience? Chaos, political instability, and poverty. Poverty on a huge scale. Cameroon, Nigeria. It's amazing and it's scary because of that juxtaposition of huge amount of natural resources, but living in the same environment, thousands, millions of people who are very, very poor, who try to live on less than $1 a day. What keeps them poor is not just the environment. What keeps them poor is a belief. It is a value system. It is a paradigm which says we are poor because others have made us poor. We are poor because our government hasn't delivered on its promises. We are poor for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons, all outside of ourselves. And occasionally there's somebody who says, no, thus far and no further. I'm going to stop complaining about the lack of cheese. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go and find my own cheese. I'm going to go and do something. And then you start getting stories, and wonderful stories, of the exceptions. But by and large, we have this problem of people having a scarcity mentality as opposed to having an abundance mentality. People with an abundance mentality are happy when somebody else succeeds. The fact that somebody has got this tender or succeeded in this way in business or has been awarded this big thing means that it's possible to win. It means that there is a possibility of success. When you have an abundance mentality, you rejoice when somebody else is blessed. Because there's plenty of potential reward for everybody in any relationship, including any business relationship. People with a scarcity mentality go through their lives believing that if somebody else gets something, then there's less for me. As if life is like a piece of cake or a whole cake, and if somebody gets a bigger slice of the cake, then there's less left over for me. Resources are virtually infinite. In sub-Saharan Africa, we've got fantastic resources, natural resources. What we need to do is to turn those resources into income generation for the ordinary people. For many years in this country, it was a crime to own gold. A crime. You had to have a special license in order to possess gold. What happened to the gold? We were then the biggest gold mining country in the world, but the gold got exported. And somebody in Switzerland or Germany or France or somewhere else worked on the gold and made beautiful jewelry. Then we imported the beautiful jewelry. We paid huge taxes on the import duties and all of that. And we bought the jewelry in the shops. That same gold that was exported at $100 an ounce in those days now came back 10 times the price in the form of jewelry, say, or watches or whatever else. We gave away our power. We gave away our power, and we need to take it back. We need to take responsibility for our own economic destiny. So if we're going to change, and here is one of many changes that could be made, any change that we make, it really is a scary thing. Because as we have to move from one way of thinking to another, we become aware of the possibility of change, and sometimes that makes us nervous. What if I fail? In fact, even worse, what if I fail again? Because I look back and I tried this thing before and it didn't work. So there's a fear of change, a fear of failure, a fear of embarrassment, whatever. But moving from one way of thinking to another way of thinking means change. And the question that I want us to kind of consider this morning is how can we go about that? What will make us want to do that? How do we become effective at that? The problem is, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. When you resist change, you sort of dig in and you bunker down and you protect your comfort zone. After a while, you become irrelevant. In the house that I used to own in Randezucht, where we had a very nice training center, I used to try to explain to people how to get to the trainer's course. And I would say to them, you come up Long Street, you follow the road past the Labia, and then you'll see there's a big hotel on the right-hand side called the Mount Nelson Hotel. At the next corner on the robot, right opposite the robot, you'll see a Presbyterian church, big Presbyterian church. Turn right at the church, take the first left, go around the corner, and we're the first house on the left. And so the value of that building for me was that it was a great landmark. Super landmark. People couldn't miss it. They would find where I was holding the course once they saw that building. Now, that's not the purpose of the building. That wasn't why it was built. People who built that building had a vision for something wonderful, I'm sure. But today, sometimes it's open on a Sunday, and you'll see a handful of people going in and out. And by and large, that building has become a landmark. In Soweto, there's a church called Regina Mundi. And in the later part of the apartheid era, it was the hub of activity. People like Bishop Tutu and Peter Story and other people would have meetings there, and there would be strategy about what to do and how to bring about change in South Africa. And it was the center of the community. Not so much today. It's a strange place that Regina Mundi Church is built. It's right in the middle of the highway. What happens is the road comes down, and then right in front of you, there's a church. And you literally have to drive around a kind of a circle to get around the church. But if you were going to go to Diepkloof, what you would tell somebody is come off the highway, follow the road, and when you get to that church, right in the middle of the road, go around and turn right, and Diepkloof is down the road on the right-hand side. Useful landmark. Unfortunately, the only person who really seems to enjoy change is this one. You don't see complaints about being changed. Now, I'm going to share some cliches with you. I'm telling you up front that they're cliches. Something becomes a cliche because it's shared often enough. It's self-evidently true. So look at these cliches, maybe make a note of them if you want to, but just think about the truth of that they carry. In order to get to where you want to be, you must be willing to leave where you are. Now, of course, that's true. What a silly thing to say. But it is remarkable how often people won't change because they're afraid to let go of what they have got in their hands. I think it's in Indonesia where they actually catch monkeys because of that habit of not wanting to let go. What they do is they weave a basket, and the basket has got a small entrance, and then there's this big basket under the entrance, and they put fruit into the basket, and they want to capture monkeys because they sell them to tourists and all awful things like that. But the way they catch the monkeys is they put the fruit in the basket, the monkey puts his hand in the basket, fills it with fruit, and then can't get his hand out of the basket. Because now that it's filled with fruit, it's too big. It won't come out of the entrance or the lip of the basket. But the monkey won't let go of the fruit. And sometimes our lives can look a bit like that. We say, I don't have very much, and I must protect what I've got. I've really got to hold on to this. And there are opportunities, and sometimes we're presented with opportunities. Let's try it. No, well, then I might have to let go of what I've got. I might lose the little bit that I have. Change what you believe in order to change what you receive. You can't go on believing the old things and expect new results. Definition of madness, according to Einstein, is to keep on doing the old thing and expect a different outcome. Change what you believe in order to change what you receive. I've said 100 times on the time that we've had together on the course that what you believe will have consequences in your life. Change the way you talk in order to change the steps you walk. Sometimes it's quite hard to change habits. It's quite difficult to develop new habits that are good, that are beneficial. But the one thing that you do have control over is the words that you speak. And if you speak words that are in agreement with the direction that you want to go, your words will program your mind. Even if your mind doesn't want to accept it at first, as you speak the words, you're walking across that pathway in your mind, and as you speak them again, you're walking the same pathway, and that pathway gets deeper and deeper. And at some point, the whole process is subconscious because it's now become part of the chemicals in your brain. And and the subconscious takes over. And remember, the subconscious can actually process 40,000 bits of information in a second, whereas your conscious mind only processes 40 bits. So that once you put this thing into your subconscious mind, by speaking it often enough, by repeating it and meditating on it often enough, after a while, the subconscious takes over. And you can drive the car without even thinking about it. You do many, many things without planning, without thinking, without working it out, because it's at the subconscious level. If you're involved in music, you'll know that that's what works. Just repetition, just practice. After a while, your fingers remember, even though you're not really thinking about what you're doing. So change the way you talk in order to change the steps that you walk. Change the seed you sow in order to change the harvest you grow. Remember John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word. Word was with God, the Word was God, but all things were made by the Word. Nothing that was being made has been made. Nothing has been made without the Word. Charles Darwin said something which I just grabbed from Instagram or somewhere. He said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." For me, that's an ongoing challenge. Really, I want to keep learning to embrace change, not just for the sake of change, but to open the possibility of new areas. I think I mentioned to you that Lindsay and I opened a pet supply store online. We are both in need of some extra income, and so we decided to do something together and to venture into an area that we've never been before. Neither of us has been there before. I've learned so much in my relationship with her. We got this little cat, you know about Busy, you've heard me talk about him, but he suddenly went blind at the age of 2. Siamese cat. And the cause of the blindness was something called PRA, progressive retinal atrophy, and his pupils work, but he can't see because there's no signal sent to the brain. So Lindsay started an Instagram page to inform people about this thing called progressive retinal atrophy, because it seemed that very few people were aware of it. Even the vets were not that aware of it. Certainly the cat breeders were not that aware of it. So she started this thing, and it grew and it grew. So I looked at this, I thought, well, the way you get to be well known is through Instagram, you see, because Busy today has got something like 9,500 followers, you see. So that looks very attractive to me, so I think I'll try that as well. Doesn't sound like my own gap, does it, when I say I'm just copying, but that's what I did. So I formed a micro MBA international Instagram page. Today I've got something like 1,100 followers. Busy the cat has got 9,200 followers. Oh my word. But anyway, it just proves that cats are more important or much more attractive than businesses, or much more interesting. What I'd like to share with you is the subject of change in that context. Now we've got a cat, it's got this following. How do you use that popularity to make some money? So we've launched this online pet store. I'll show you a visual of it just now, in the hopes of investigating some sort of way of generating a bit of income. Historically, in the world, there were kind of 4 main areas, times of change. There was a time when everybody had one job, same job. It's called a hunter-gatherer. You wanted food, you knew exactly what to do. You went out and you hunted, you killed something, or you went and you gathered stuff off the trees, off the bushes, and you ate. That was how life worked. So one day, a group of these hunter-gatherers were going along the road out to do their hunting. And they saw some people that looked as if there's some people gathering around, and they were, and looked like they were sort of messing around in the soil, you know? They were drawing lines and putting things in. And they said, "What are you doing?" In my mind, so I'm thinking this, "What are you doing?" And the people said, "No, we're planting food." "You're doing what?" "No, we're planting food. We've got vegetables that we're putting in here, and we want to eat, so we're planting food." "But that's not how you get food. You get food by going out to kill something. You get food by picking it off the trees." Ha ha ha, isn't it a joke? What a silly idea. Only thing is, they came back 2 or 3 weeks later, and there's all this green stuff, and the spinach is growing, and there's some tomatoes, and there's cabbages, and for much less effort. Here's the point: for much less effort, you get a superabundance of results. You have to spend a whole day tracking an animal and, you know, killing it with your bow and arrow or your spear or whatever. You've got to spend a long time looking for the berries that you want to pick. These people plant the things, and they've got, look at all the results, look at all the abundance. So people decided to change their jobs. A lot of people stopped being hunter-gatherers, and they became agricultural. What made them change? They saw value. They saw immense value. They said, for much less work, for much less effort, we can get a better outcome. We can get a better result. So they changed to become agriculturalists. And by the way, maybe we're a bit late in this country when we say that everybody must just have a little farm and they can grow their own vegetables. We've moved on from there. Agriculture is now has got to be huge. It's got to be a macro kind of enterprise in order to be viable from a business point of view. But anyway, that's another thought. The next step historically was this one. Somebody discovered that if you take steam and you try and bottle it up, it'll shoot the cork out of the bottle. There's power there. And they worked from there to harnessing that steam to make machinery work. And we started developing something called the Industrial Revolution. One of the things that happened in the Industrial Revolution is that the concept of a job, J-O-B, became clear for the first time. Instead of people hunting for their own things, growing their own things, working together as a family, now they started working for somebody else to make somebody else rich. Isn't it interesting how today, for most people, that's the ultimate. You must get a good job so that you can work for 40 years, for 40 hours a week, to retire on 40% of your income, and you make somebody else rich. That happened because of the Industrial Revolution. By the way, we inherited something from the Industrial Revolution which is not that great, and that is the idea that people are liabilities. People are not assets. If you look at a balance sheet, you'll see on the one side of the balance sheet, it says assets. On the other side, it says liabilities. Now, everybody knows what assets are. Assets are your intellectual property. Assets are the actual physical property that you own. Assets might be motor cars and computers and systems. And then on the other side are the liabilities of this balance sheet. And the first item on the top of the liabilities is what? People, wages. So you've got assets, liabilities, and it's called a balance sheet. If the one outweighs the other in the wrong direction, you've got a problem. In other words, if you have more liabilities than you have assets, then the balance sheet doesn't balance. And the simplest way to make it balance is to look at the very top line on the liabilities. Let's get rid of some people. People are liabilities. Horrible thought, but that's what we inherited from the Industrial Revolution. And we're moving, today we have moved to a large extent to an information, knowledge-based age, where the value is the data, the value is the skill. And a lot of people are starting to realize the value of working from home, of not necessarily being employed by a corporation, but offering a service to whoever wants to use it. People in some areas, in some countries, are getting enthusiastic about the idea of being your own boss. Unfortunately, in sub-Saharan Africa, that isn't the case. Being your own boss is the last resort. When you really, really just can't get a job, or you've been retrenched, or you've been thrown out of somewhere else, then you reluctantly say, well, I'd better learn to do something for myself. I'm so grateful that I'm in the position where I'm my own boss. Now, I struggle. I know what it means to be broke. I've told you that before. But I wouldn't change my position for anything. It's such a privilege. But change happened in history. And people changed because they believed that they saw value in the new paradigm. The hunter-gatherers saw value in doing agriculture. The agricultural people began to see value. They thought it was valuable in going to work and getting a salary, instead of just being stuck on the farm. You go into the town and you could socialize while you were there. And there are people who are seeing value in the knowledge information age. They're seeing value in saying, I have information, I have skills that I can share with people that can make a difference in their lives. So I'm going to market my skills. Change. Who recognizes these two names? Does anybody recognize who they are? Semmelweis, Pasteur? Anybody? Don't all talk at once.
I don't know the first one, but when I see Pasteur, then I think of Louis Pasteur.
Yeah, yes, Louis Pasteur, pasteurized milk, yes, that's where we get that from. Semmelweis was a Hungarian guy who was working more or less the same time, in fact, at the same time as Pasteur. He was in France, but the Hungarians and the French both discovered at more or less the same time that there were these little things that existed that you couldn't see with your naked eye. But these little things were very powerful and very dangerous sometimes. They were called bacteria, germs, later on viruses. Imagine the impact that that new information had on the world. Before they came along, if you're a woman and you're going to have a baby, the last person that you'd call would be the doctor. You would not allow the doctor near you if you were wise. You didn't know why, but your mother had warned you and your grandmother had warned you that when the doctor comes, very often the baby dies and the mother gets sick and sometimes she dies too. Whereas when the midwife comes, then things go better. Why? Well, the doctor was also the vet. And the doctor would maybe come in from the fields having put his arm up a horse's backside to sort something out. He'd come inside, maybe wash his hands, maybe not. And he would handle and he would help the mother deliver the baby. And of course, there was sepsis, there was infection. And of course, there was death. But imagine the change that happened in the medical industry, in the medical world, after the advent of this new knowledge from Semmelweis and Pasteur. Change happened. You don't just, on a battlefield, take a saw and saw somebody's leg off and hope that they'll live. You now take them into a field hospital and make sure everything is sterile, everything's well cleaned, and then you operate. And more people survived that sort of operation. Change happened because there was value. Here's a verse from the Bible that is as non-religious as you can get, I think. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much increase comes by the strength of the ox. I was reading this some years back, and it kind of stuck. And I thought, that's what it's about. Here is somebody who's pushing his plow, and he's hot and sweaty, and his wife's bringing him some cold drink and saying to him, you know, you should do what the guy next door does. What does he do? Look at him over there. He's got an ox in front of his plow, and he's not hot and sweaty. He's just walking behind, guiding the plow, but the ox is doing all the work. Why don't you get an ox? And he says, yes, and where's this ox going to sleep? And who's going to clean up after it? We've got this clean manger, you know, got this little hockey. And if we put an ox in there, you must understand that there's ox doo-doo that you've got to clean up the next morning. You've got to feed the thing. Ah, yes, there's a price attached to having an ox. But the question is it worth paying that price? When you see the value of having the ox as it pulls the plow, as it does other things maybe, much increase comes by the strength of the ox. Change. How do you bring about change? How do you bring about change in your own life? What will make you change? Really make you change? Not just agree with Cedric on a course about something, but what will make you change your paradigm, your way of thinking, your way of approaching a life, your way of solving problems maybe? What will make you change anything about yourself? When I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I was the national sales marketing manager for ICI Pharmaceuticals. I designed this little formula to explain to my reps, to the people who worked in the company, how it is, what they would need to do in order to get a doctor to prescribe our company's products, to change his habit, his prescribing habits, from writing a product for this other company compared to writing the product from our company. What will make him change? And I designed this little formula, which I love because it's original. I own it, if you like. You're welcome to it, of course. It explains what will bring about change. And in the formula, it's a social formula. It's not meant to be a mathematical formula, so don't get scared of the formula parts. But C represents the change that you try to bring about, the desired change. And the things in brackets, the A and the B and the D, say that those things must be present for change to happen. All three of them must be there, and they must be bigger. They must outweigh. That's what that little sign means. That is bigger than the F. The things in the brackets are bigger than whatever F is. So C is the desired change. Now, the question is, what is A and B and D? A is dissatisfaction with the status quo, the way things are now. So in other words, in the environment in which this was developed, the issue was this. Medicines work for the most part. They do more or less what they're supposed to do, but anything that has an effect in your body will also have some side effects. That's the reality. It's not a surprise. If anybody knows that, if there's anything at all in the world that has no side effects whatsoever, then it probably has no effect whatsoever. So it's very difficult to have a medicine, a drug, that targets only your little left toe. In dealing with the pain in your little left toe, because you've broken your toe and now you're taking a pain reliever, guess what? That pain reliever will have an effect on your mind. It'll have an effect on the rest of your body, might have an effect on your heart rate. All sorts of other things are possible. So now what What we know is that whatever the doctor's using, he's got used to it, he knows how it works, but it's not perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect drug. So when our reps are to go in and talk to the doctor, they must casually point out the problem with what he is doing. In other words, get his cooperation or get his agreement that what he's using is not 100% perfect. It by and large treats the condition, it does it pretty well, but it could be better. And guess what? We have something here which indeed is better. But without him agreeing, without him coming to a point where he's a little bit unhappy with what he's using to prescribe at the moment, what we have to offer isn't even going to be considered. If you're 100% happy with the way you are, you're not going to be open to change. You've all had experience of this thing called church in different ways. Imagine a pastor who preaches his heart out and he's really prayed and he's prepared and he's got this wonderful sermon and he preaches and people all say, yes, that was wonderful. I was so blessed. It was the Spirit used you, whatever the phrases are in the particular church, but they don't change. The people stay the same. Why would they stay the same? Because they're not really unhappy about the way they are right now. They're comfortable. They've got enough money. They're not too sick. They're fine. Until there's dissatisfaction with the status quo, we're not open for change. One of the good advantages that I have over people who come on this course, Dave is an exception to this because he's got a different reason. But I know that whatever you've got at the moment, you can't be 100% happy with the tools that you have available, the opportunities that you've got, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I know that there must be some dissatisfaction with the status quo, with the way things are, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So step one, tick it off. Is there dissatisfaction with the status quo? B, the second part of the formula, there must be a shared vision. Not just the word shared vision of the way that things could be if you were to use this new medical product, if you were to use micro-MBA in an appropriate way, if you were to vote for this political party. That's what the election's all about, isn't it? Think about it. What happens on an election campaign? Number one, people point out what's wrong with the ruling party. People point out what's wrong with the story that the opposition is coming with. They mock the people who say those things. Why? Because they try to downplay what they're saying and want people to be unhappy with the other party's message. And then they present a vision. They say, if you vote for us, we will make sure everybody has houses, everybody has land, everybody's got jobs, you know, the sort of thing. But now let's be real. If you're going to be effective in marketing your services as a service provider providing micro MBA, number one, you must be able to identify what are the areas that people are not happy with. People are not happy that they can't pay their children's school fees, or that sometimes their children go to school without shoes, or they have to walk a great distance to get to school. They can't afford to pay for the bus or the taxi. There's some dissatisfaction with the status quo. So now you must share a vision. How do you share a vision of the way that things could be? Well, you might use some video material to say these people are people just like you and me, And this is what they have to say about this program. This is how it helped them. Here are some stories, and there's plenty of stories on that Google Drive in PowerPoint format, just individual stories of people who have been through the course and what they had to say and how it impacted their lives, a shared vision. And the third thing that must be present for change to take place is knowledge of the first practical steps to take. It's all very well having a vision, but if you don't know what you've got to do today and tomorrow and the next day, what steps to take, then you're going to get frustrated. I'll show you just now what happens when one of these is missing in the formula. But does that make sense to you? Change will happen, the formula says, provided those three things are present. Some dissatisfaction with the way things are now, the status quo, a shared vision of the way that things could be, and it must be a shared vision, not an imposed vision, not what I think you need, but what you can buy into, what you would like to see as an outcome in your life. And then you must know, what are the first practical steps to take? What do I start doing? How do I get to that, having that vision, if you like, the realization of that vision? And those things, those three things must outweigh the cost of changing. And for some people, I mean, micro MBA is not an expensive program, but it's expensive for poor people. If you offered a 5-day program in the corporate world, micro MBA would be not worth considering because it's too cheap. Can't be good because it's if you're only paying 920 Rand for the materials, it can't be worth much. But the problem is the context in which micro MBA is most useful is, of course, helping people to establish their own small businesses. So the cost can be a factor that mitigates against them using it, can be. But there's not only the economic, there's also the psychological terms. If I've been used to getting handouts, if I've been used to going to the soup kitchen and getting food, if I've been used to getting my social grants and I'm comfortable as much as I can be with that, then I don't want to change psychologically. The idea of taking responsibility for myself can be scary. So there's the formula, there's the whole formula for change. And this works. I mean, if you're in a meeting sometime and you're wondering, why are people not listening to this man up front or this woman up front? What's happening? What is missing? Maybe they are talking about a desired change that they want to bring about, or they're suggesting, and maybe there is some dissatisfaction with the status quo. That's why we're having the meeting, because now we're having a meeting to discuss how to go forward. But when you come to these two, the B and the D, sometimes people emphasize one and they forget about the other one. They talk about what we've got to do. We've all got to wear blue shirts. We've all got to do this. We've all got to do that. It can be any silly thing. And they emphasize the steps, the actual practical steps. And as you sit and listen, you're saying, but where's the vision? Where is this going to take us? And sometimes you can just help things along in a meeting like that. I'll say, excuse me, we are unhappy with the way things are. You're suggesting we do certain things, but what you're not helping us to see is what will be the result of doing those things. Where is it going to take us? What is the vision that we need to have as we implement these practical steps? Or it could be the other way around. People sometimes are very good at talking about vision. They talk about the new South Africa. They talk about economic reforms. They talk about stimulus packages. And it all sounds wonderful. And then you said, but hang on a second. How does the money get to the right people in this stimulus package? who's going to be responsible for making sure that this 500 billion rand that you've allocated for this COVID-19 economic stimulus package, who's going to be sure? Who's going to ensure that the money gets to the right people? The practical steps. The vision sounds fine. Makes you look good. The whole formula must be in place. Let's see what happens when you leave something out. Let's leave A out. And I've touched on that already, but it's self-evident. If people are comfortable with the status quo, if they're really comfortable with the way things are now, you can talk all day, you can preach all you want, you can threaten them if you want to, but if people are comfortable, they're not going to want to change. They might be polite, they might say, we'll think about it, but change won't happen. That's true of the history of our country. Wasn't that long ago that a lot of people in this country, a lot of people, wanted change. And they said they wanted change. And people like Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu and many, many other people went out on a limb and started challenging the status quo. The problem was, in this country, the problem was that the people with the power were comfortable with the status quo. The people with what power? Well, they had the political power, obviously. They had the military power. They had the economic power. And the people who had all that power were actually happy, comfortable with the status quo. And the status quo was that 4 million people would be looked after very well in this country, and that the other 40 million people or more would be there to also be looked after in a way, but at a distance. And there would be a limit to what they could achieve in society. They could be servants, but they could never become bosses. That was the status quo. So in this country, if there was going to be change, and think about it, if it was 1980, 85, anyway, any time after the 1950s, if there's going to be change, something would need to be done to make the people with the power uncomfortable. What happened? Oh, there were some toys, there were some people who burnt their dompas, their passbooks, there were people who started protesting, the school children who got uptight about being forced to learn in Afrikaans, and there were reactions from the police, and things got out of hand, and people got shot, and it was an awful situation. But the people with the power protected that power. And they didn't want to acknowledge that there was a need for change because they were comfortable with the status quo. I can remember a time when U2 had a concert in New York Park, New York Central Park. I don't know how many people there were, but there were hundreds of thousands of people, probably 60,000 people, which is a huge meeting in those days. And at this rock concert, Bono played a video in the middle of the concert. And the video showed something about police brutality towards Black people in South Africa. And he stopped the concert. He played this video for the people, and he said to them, listen, people, Bishop Tutu is in this country, in America at the moment, and he's going to be talking to your leaders about the need to stop trading with South Africa, to impose economic sanctions. Okay? I want you to go to work tomorrow, and I want you to tell your leaders to support them and to say we mustn't trade with South Africa. What was that about? Well, idea was that if you impose economic sanctions, then the South African government will not be comfortable with the status quo, and they might be open to change. Truth is, that backfired a bit. We had an arms manufacturer here called Denel, who learned to make arms much better than the arms that we used to import. Today, still, we sell arms to Israel and to other people because we make very good helicopters, we make very good machine guns. We became creative to protect the status quo. Get the point? Discomfort, number one. If there is no shared vision, people will get lost. People are led into captivity. If there's no shared vision, you could have an enthusiastic start, but it'll soon collapse. And you know, various people had various visions for South Africa. One of the prime ministers, P.W. Botha, he had a wonderful vision for South Africa. He thought we must show the world that we are not afraid to share power. So we will have, believe it or not, if you weren't around, you won't believe it, but this is what was imposed on South Africa. We will have a colored parliament with colored representatives elected by the colored people. We will have an Indian parliament with Indian representatives voted for by the Indian people in this country. We will have a white parliament with white representatives voted for by the white people in this country. The black people will each have their own parliaments in each of the homelands, in Bophuthatswana and in the Transkei and oh my word, and the Ciskei. That was an imposed vision, and it certainly didn't work because nobody bought into it. But in the meantime, things were changing. Time was marching on. Nelson Mandela was getting old, and he was getting sick on the island. And everywhere you went in the world, you would see big, big posters and things written on the side of subways called saying, "Free Nelson Mandela," you know? The whole world was aware of it. What happens if that man dies in prison? There'll be chaos in South Africa. And so people started being a little concerned and trying to share visions of possible futures. But the trouble is, when they spoke to Nelson Mandela, they quietly went to the island, to Robben Island, to talk to him. He was a stubborn old man as far as they were concerned, because he was saying, no, the only vision that I can support is a vision where everybody in the country of their birth has a right to vote. Everybody. Now, today that seems ludicrous. Of course, everybody must have the right to vote. But in 1980, that was inconceivable. I mean, women had only been allowed to vote for a few years. Now you want black people to vote. And the conversations went on. And the sticking point was around this vision of one person, one vote in the land of their birth. And it was only when people started agreeing about that things could change in South Africa. What about the first practical steps? You want change to happen? Just think about our history. Change could not happen without the first practical steps being in place. Again, the sticking point was this stubborn old man, old Nelson Mandela, Madiba. He said, if you want to take this discussion forward, you will have to let the political prisoners off of Robben Island. You'll have to welcome back the political refugees who are out of the country. You will have to unban our organizations. And you know, those discussions went on for months, a couple of years, in fact, without any change happening, because it was such an enormous thing to come to terms with for the government of the day. And I can remember where I was. I was in an office in Mowbray in the Triple Trust organization, and somebody said, "Cedric, come and listen to this." And there was a TV in the office, and there I saw Prime Minister of the country, F.W. de Klerk, standing in Parliament and making an announcement and saying that Dr. Mandela, suddenly it was Dr. Mandela, and Mr. Sisulu will come off the island next week, and they will be followed shortly by all of the other political detainees. The people who are out of the country because of their political beliefs will be welcomed back. And we will be proceeding to discussions about an open and free election. And then he said, with immediate effect, the ANC is unbanned and the PAC is unbanned. And with immediate effect, the Communist Party is unbanned. Now you must understand, and it's hard for people who weren't there to understand this, but we were brought up, we being myself and my colleagues and people even younger than me, we were brought up in an environment where we were warned constantly. We were warned in church, we were warned in our schools that you must be careful of the communists. In fact, in Afrikaans, they used to speak about the rooi gevaar, the red danger, you know? And they used to talk about the swart gevaar. They used to say things like, you know, the Chinese are in Tanzania building railway lines, and they are just doing this for Africa because they don't have enough space in China for all their people, so they're coming to take over Africa. So we have to protect ourselves against this communist onslaught. First practical steps had to be there. And those organizations had to be unbanned, and Quanto Sizwe and APLA had to be unbanned in order for change to happen. And then it wasn't comfortable. There was a price. Oh my, change is never tidy. Change is never all perfect. And when you start implementing micro MBA, some things will go wrong. Some people will make promises that they don't keep. Hopefully enough will go right to encourage you, but change, by definition, if you've never done it before, then now you are changing. You're implementing something for the first time. And things were messy around here. They still are messy 26 years later. In fact, they've got messier in the last 10 or 12 years. Change is sometimes messy, but it still needs to happen. Because that's the way the formula is structured. That's the way life is structured. If those three things are present, and if they outweigh the cost of changing, then the change will happen. Now, I've found this to be intensely practical. If you are writing a proposal, you want people to support what you're doing in your organization. When you write the proposal, check it against this formula. Understand that you are writing to ask some organization or some funding agency or a company to support what you're doing. Presumably, they're not supporting you at the moment. So you're asking them to change. You're asking them to make a decision to support you. The formula must work. What you tell them must cover all of these things if you want to be successful. There's no guarantee that you'll be successful because the cost might be too high. But if you want to at least have a chance of being successful, then these three things must be present. A, you must tell them something that will make them feel uncomfortable about the status quo. You might need to show them pictures about the poverty in the area. You might need to tell them give them some statistics about the number of children who are hungry in this community. You need to tell them something so that when they read this proposal of yours, they say, oh, that doesn't sound good. They become a little uncomfortable with the status quo. Then you need to give them a shared vision. You need to give them a picture of something that of the way that things could be. And the only way to do that I know of is really to have stories of people who have succeeded, or areas where the program has been implemented and where mothers are empowered to look after their children, where husbands are empowered to earn enough money to support the family. Give them a vision, help them to see that this program has made a difference in the lives of a good number of people in the last years. And then talk about the practical steps. We need to get 2 more trainers trained, or whatever it is, or we need to buy so many sets of materials, and we need to pay for a venue to host the actual training course. Whatever costs are involved, or whatever steps are involved, you spell it out and you say, and the cost of this process will be so much. And then if the formula works, it'll be because A and B and D are in place, and because they weigh enough to outweigh the cost in economic terms particularly, but sometimes also in psychological terms. When you're offering this program to people in the community, help them to make a right decision by checking the formula. Make sure those 3 things are in place. And make sure that you help them so that in their minds, the value of those 3 things, the value of the change is bigger than the cost.